Before COVID, I was like, no, of course, we have to be together. I mean, again, like talking about culture, like that is where our culture comes from. And, how are we going to collaborate if we aren't physically together? And I think that what this proved to me is that with the right people and the right kind of like maturity level and skill set and emotional intelligence and communication skills, the virtual environment can actually really help us like unlock another level of growth. We've hired a couple of people over the past year. I'm based in Massachusetts, one's in Tennessee, one's in Texas. So it was so freeing to be able to do a national search for talent, be super picky about who we brought on board, again, making 100% sure the values match and making sure the skill set was there and not having to compromise either. And then also I've had a couple of people relocate during COVID for, personal issues, to help family members or, spouse gets a job and relocates. And it has been absolutely huge to be able to retain talent, whereas before I would have, like, oh, you're moving to Kentucky. Sorry. Like, I guess we can't work together anymore.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. It is game day at the Play Your Position podcast. Welcome back to what is going to be another fantastic conversation. I've got an amazing guest ready to take us on her leadership journey and in turn share with you some points about how to grow your business, how to grow yourself, how to recognize when you've hit a plateau and what to do about it. Her name is Meghan Lynch. Meghan, are you ready for kickoff?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Yes. So team, Meghan Lynch is the CEO of 6 Point Creative, a brand strategy agency that helps second stage companies break through growth plateaus. As part of her mission to help small businesses challenge the goliaths, Meghan has served as an expert advisor to second stage clients in a wide range of industries, from fast casual restaurants to industrial manufacturers. Meghan was named an Enterprising Woman of the Year in 2019 and enjoys testing her own limits as an endurance runner. She's coming to us today from Western Massachusetts, where she said it's hot and spring is in full bloom. So Meghan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Mary Lou. Happy to be here.
So right out of the gate, Meghan, to set the context for our conversation, would you please share with us the story of when you got the call to leadership and how is that call influencing you to play your current position as the CEO of 6 Point Creative?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's kind of funny about me is that, like, from a pretty young age, I'm the oldest sibling. I've got three younger brothers, so I've always kind of been like a leader. My dad is actually an Episcopal priest, and my mom's a teacher, and so I was sort of always like, I like to be in the room where adults were and kind of do the things that they were doing, even growing up. And I think the leadership piece has always kind of been a part of my DNA and particularly like a servant leadership piece. And so I think the thing that's sort of most surprising about my journey is to find myself in business when like that was not at all a part of my family's, world. And also, honestly, it's not really a place that I thought of as being a place for servant leadership, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And so it's been kind of like a really interesting journey to be able to kind of like apply the things that I care about really deeply in terms of modeling, a servant leadership mentality in a world that, I feel like these days it's kind of actually become more people are talking about it. You have like the Brene Browns of the world and stuff, really kind of putting that forward. But I feel like when I started in business 15 or 20 years ago. Like it really wasn't part of the conversation. So, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you bring servant leadership to the work you do with your clients? As somebody who is overseeing an agency, and I was on your website in preparation for our call, and I have to say, I absolutely love how you each have a little capsule of, favorite things, and then you click on it and there's the picture of the person. I thought that was so clever. And obviously as a creative agency, you put creativity to work, but what is the link between running a creative agency and servant leadership in a world that has changed so much in the last year and will continue to change?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the big piece of it is really leading with empathy. We really try, and I really, stress with my team is that we always have to be thinking about the world from the point of view of our clients and not kind of how we're seeing things. So, because sometimes those things overlap and sometimes they just don't. And I think particularly, last year in COVID, it really kind of put that to the test, right? Because, we have some of our larger clients, when the world starts crashing down and everybody kind of panics a little bit and starts freezing budgets. And, so our world is crashing at the same time. And so I think it took a lot to kind of, get the team together, take a deep breath and really think about like, okay, at this moment, I need you not to worry about what we're going to do next, but we need to be totally rallying around our clients and be asking them what is going on in their world and how can we be of service to them. And I think it was one of the things that kind of like helped our team sort of like keep a center and be like, okay, we still have work to do. We still have to reach out. We still have to find out what's going on. And we're still going to figure out how to be of service, even though, there's zero business as usual. And it was really powerful. I think it was a way to like really, as I said, keep us moving forward, keep us grounded and keep us being meaningful and relevant at a time when we definitely could have, panicked and just sort of shut down ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people did panic and then shut down. That was a common response to events of the last 15 months. What kinds of things do you and your team help businesses do? Could you take us into some granular details about maybe for example, this is a common situation we see and this is how we help?
Yeah, sure. So basically what our team does is we really focus on kind of the intersection between business strategy and brand and positioning strategy. So when we are called in to work with a client, we usually work with clients who have had organic growth over a number of years, sometimes even decades or generations of they've just been truly great at what they do and they have seen the benefits of that. They keep good relationships, all of those things that you need to kind of create the foundation of a healthy business. And then at some point, their sales plateau, kind of what the business can accomplish sort of stalls out. And they need to kind of find themselves looking at opportunities. And often they see opportunities, out in the marketplace of like, oh, we could do this with our product or we could serve this market. But it's not what they've always done. And so they're kind of, entering this uncharted territory. And that is a scary thing to do. And also for these companies, it's also a highly risky thing to do because we work with family-owned, closely held companies. These are companies who are like gambling with their own money, and they're often huge employers in their local area. They're very committed to their community. They're leaders in the community themselves. And so there's definitely this feeling, talking about empathy, like there's definitely this fear of, okay, we know we need to try something new in order to grow, but also if we try something new, we may be putting all of this at risk. And so what our team is really adept at is basically showing them kind of like a third way of, we can help them go after the new opportunities systematically and confidently and also make sure that we are not harming anything that they have built, the value that they've built in relationships, the value in their own brand that they've built over time, in their reputation, really make sure that this new initiative doesn't put anything at risk unnecessarily in the company that they've built.
Yeah, I can imagine if I was part of a family-owned business that, say, had been around for 3 generations. That's a long time. And then to go all in on, what we call the shiny object of the day, right? Which they're everywhere. And it sounds like your agency is really focused on, let's slow things down to speed things up. Let's take a look at all the pieces and not just jump into the pool everybody else is jumping into, right?
Exactly.
It's so easy to do that today because everything digital is accessible to us, and it doesn't make sense for everybody to do all the things.
Right. Yeah. And oftentimes it's like, let's say, we work with a lot of food manufacturers, and let's say that they have been serving, they've been heavily concentrated in food service. And obviously in COVID, that was a really scary place to have a customer concentration. They know that there's opportunity in direct to consumer sales, online sales, e-commerce. They know that there's opportunity in retail, but it's really not their core competency. It's not what their team knows. It's not where they can shine. So I think at those points, it becomes really easy to either stay in a rut and just be like, that's not what we do. Let's just keep our heads down. And you could miss a lot of opportunity. Or, the mistake could be you kind of again, jump at that shiny object. And also there's so many providers out there who will kind of promise the moon. But if you don't know what you're buying or how to buy it, it really becomes difficult to judge success. It becomes difficult to know, is this the right pricing? What should I be investing in this? And so that's where we kind of form that bridge between what is your business strategy? What are you trying to accomplish? And then what is going to be, how do we help you narrow down out of all of the opportunities that you could pursue? What are going to be the ones that, gives you the best return on investment and makes the most sense for who you are and kind of the DNA of your company. And I think, slowing down to speed up is such a great thing. The mantra in our company is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. We stole it from the Marines. Not a bad place to take a saying. But yeah, so it's that sometimes we get that action bias and we panic and just want to jump at something and then get frustrated that it didn't work. But our job is to really that there's a few steps that we can take every single company that we work with through to help them find that right opportunity for them and help them evaluate their internal team, put together an external team to help them accomplish it, get everybody aligned to figure out how they're going to measure success, what the plan looks like. And then if you can get all of those things in place, then when you move to execution, you're like, oh, actually, this wasn't as difficult as we thought it was going to be. So, yeah.
So how do you measure success, Meghan?
Well, I think that there's a couple of things. So one is, like I said, I'm a servant leader and just kind of a values-led person. And so I kind of, that there is this sort of definitely, we're in the business world. So profitability, I think, just becomes a way to say, is this a valuable thing to have in the market? And so, so I do think that profitability is definitely my key business success measure. But then also, there's this big piece of how are people feeling when they're working with you, and kind of at the end of the day, how long do your relationships ask? The definition of brand that we use is the kind of reputation piece of it, of that. What are people saying about you when you're not in the room, to quote Jeff Bezos. And I think that reputation is that is a critical success measure of, not what do I say about myself and my company, but what do other people say about myself and my company? And for our clients, the same thing. I take their reputation really seriously. So I'm not going to do anything or advise anything that I think is going to put that in jeopardy. Because I know, again, especially if this is a family business, sometimes literally their name is attached to it.
Right.
And you can't just sort of rebrand that or walk away from that. You really do have to take that seriously, and how people feel, when they hear what you're doing, how people feel when they work with you, that's a big piece of just, being able to stand behind what you do and feel good about the money that you're making.
Mm-hmm. Yes. When your business is in your name, a rebrand isn't the easiest thing. It's possible, but I imagine there's a lot of moving parts. One of the things that you mentioned you're really passionate about, clearly you're passionate about servant leadership and paying attention to the way people feel when they're working with you and your team. You mentioned you're passionate about the peer learning experience as a means of growth and personal development. Would you talk about how the peer learning process has affected you and your growth path, and what makes that model so powerful?
Yeah, so I think for me, it really was kind of the turning point from me just kind of being in business and just kind of feeling like a fish out of water, to really feeling like, ooh, I have found my place. I have found a place where I can be valuable. So when I first started the company, I was 27 years old. I had no idea what I was doing. Luckily, I was working with two partners who were much more experienced than I was, but they were really looking to me to run the business. They were much more kind of like the creative executors. And so I had to kind of learn pretty quickly, just thrown into the fire. Okay, how are we going to do this? And when I first started, I was like, well, I didn't know any better. So I was just kind of going out to, Chamber of Commerce events and things like that, where everybody's just throwing business cards at each other. And, you say,
That was
exactly, you say, oh, hey, Mary Lou, how's business? And you're like, oh yeah, business is great. Oh yeah, things are great. And so I would walk away from those events going, oh my gosh, I'm the only one who is terrible at this, because business is not great. And I have no idea what I'm doing, but clearly everybody else is great. And it wasn't until I was asked to join Family Business Center, even though I didn't have a family business, but they kind of allowed closely held businesses to come into it as well, and joined a CEO roundtable in that group, that I really heard business leaders be vulnerable. That was the first time I had ever heard it, was walking into a room, and when everybody was doing their check-in, as the newbie, I went last, and everybody went around the room and was like, oh my gosh, I've got so many problems. These are my top 3 that, and I was like, oh, I love these people. They have problems. I have problems. I can learn from them. And I finally felt like, oh, I get it. People actually weren't telling me the truth when they said, how's business? They were posturing. Oh, okay, I get it. And it really made me feel like, oh, okay, I'm not terrible about this. I'm normal. The problems that I'm having are normal. Everybody goes through them. And if everybody goes through them, then everybody must be able to learn and get better. And that was when everything really finally clicked for me. And then also being in the room with people, being vulnerable about their challenges, it clarified for me exactly how we could help companies. Because, when I was in the room with these people, I was like, some of the stuff, was totally out of my wheelhouse of HR stuff. I'll take anybody else's expertise on dealing with that. But, but when they were talking about positioning, when they were talking about branding, when they were talking about growth opportunities, I was like, oh, actually, what we do could totally help them solve these problems. And I started to really see patterns in the issues that people were bringing to these groups, and particularly with, family businesses, long-standing businesses. I learned that we were a thing called second stage companies with very predictable growing pains. And I was like, oh, this is a pattern. I love patterns. We could totally customize solutions to help these companies at this particular life stage that they're in. So it was kind of this dual piece of I felt like I finally belonged in the room, and it was exciting because I really saw the connection between these people who I had really grown to care a lot about and I felt like were my people and what I did every day. So kind of like bringing those together was absolutely huge for me to kind of unlock a new passion for the business in myself.
Wow, what a great story. And team, I hope you're listening to this because the peer learning approach is, as Meghan just described, unbelievably powerful for several reasons. I want to highlight the two she mentioned. One is you finally feel like you're in a room where you belong. There are peers, people just like you who are struggling and also winning. It's not like these networking groups that we used to go to pre-COVID. I love the visual of everybody's just throwing their business cards around. It's like the confetti coming from the sky. Here's my business. And I, on a side note, I found a box of business cards from back in like 2007. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is an artifact from a different time in my life. But the other piece that you brought up too is when we, again, slow down long enough to really listen to the pain points of other people, we can find patterns the way you did. And those aha moments of, this is what I do, right? Connecting the dots, to bring up Steve Jobs again. Although you brought up Jeff Bezos, but we often quote Steve Jobs about connecting the dots and Bezos about branding. And that's, instead of trying to guess all the time about who you can serve, find people just like you and have real conversations. And I guarantee you it's going to happen. That's what peer learning is really. Now, are you still part of that group? I'm curious, or have you moved on to other groups?
Yeah, actually, unfortunately, that group went out during COVID. That was their kind of last year, but hopefully it will resurrect itself in some ways. But the big peer group that I'm a part of now, I'm a part of a few, but the kind of main one in my life is the Women's Presidents Organization. It's an international organization with local chapters, and that group, they are like my board of advisors and confidants, and they've been with me. I've been a part of the group for probably almost 10 years. And so they've been with me from like the birth of my son through like huge changes in our business. And so having people like that who know you and know what you've been through, and then to go through something like COVID together. I remember when we first gathered in the beginning of it, and you're just kind of like looking around the virtual room and saying like, oh my gosh, like, what if we don't survive? Like what is going to happen to us? And and just seeing like the panic that everybody came with initially to now, the conversations are so different, and everybody has come out so much stronger and smarter, different in a lot of ways, but it's been such an inspiring group to be around, and has been like my anchor to share information and just keep me steady through something like this. Because leading a business is a lonely thing. It's as good relationships as you can have with your leadership team and stuff, there's definitely something certainly lonely about being where the buck stops. And so having a group that really understands that, I think, is just so invaluable. And I know that there's a bunch of different versions of it, but I would highly encourage everybody to find their own. I can't say enough about what it's meant for me personally and for the business.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
All of the years I've been podcasting, you're the first person who's talked specifically about a peer learning group in that way. And I think it's very important for anybody, whether you're, if you work for a company, there's those employee internal groups where you can find the others to gather and learn together and talk about issues and challenges, and also your celebrations, right? We're going to get to celebration in a little bit. But before we do, I would like for you to share a time, Meghan, when you found yourself playing out of position. Things did not go according to your game plan, even though you thought you had it nailed down. You were metaphorically sacked, intercepted, or you fumbled the ball. What happened? And then what was the lesson that you took away from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of fumbles over the past dozen years, but I think that one that really sticks out to me and that, you know, has been kind of like top of mind for me lately is about, I'm going to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I acquired another agency, and I did so at the time for, you know, a couple of specific reasons. But one of the things that I did not do that definitely blindsided me was that I didn't think enough about kind of vetting the culture of that other agency, not just the people within it, but also its clients. You know, I think on paper, it made a lot more sense than once you got humans involved in it. So while I don't look back on it as saying like, oh, I wish I never did that, I think, you know, a lot of, you know, growth and learning came from it. It was one thing where I guess I just didn't quite understand the importance of my role in not just letting culture kind of bubble up organically from who I am and how I lead, but being very, very explicit about what I want to see in the culture, what behaviors look like, you know, what kind of, you know, clients we work with and what they look like. Again, all of those kind of like soft things that just for me make the difference between, you know, to use the football, you know, metaphor, just kind of like lobbing a pass out there and just throwing that really tight spiral, you know, that like, it's just two different experiences, and also just having like the perfect team around you and really being able to align with the customers who are set up to receive what you want to give them. And basically what I learned was that like, oh, I acquired a company and I acquired like revenue, but it wasn't right fit revenue. And so I basically, you know, spent all that time putting together that deal, and then kind of, you know, over the years afterwards, sort of like systematically dismantling it all. Just, you know, as I would find like, oh, here's another piece that fits. All right, that doesn't work. Okay, here's another piece that doesn't fit. And so I think it was a great learning experience, because I don't know how else you learn those things without making those mistakes. But for me, if I ever did it again, that would be the first thing that I would vet, would be all of those soft things. And then, you know, it has to make sense on paper, but I would pay way more attention to culture, to fit, and to all of those intangibles.
Yes. Again, thank you for bringing up a piece of the bigger puzzle. When we think about acquiring anything, it feels so exciting, especially when you think, wow, this could, I don't know, 2x, 5x, 10x my annual revenues, or change, you know, it could be any situation. It could be moving to a new neighborhood, right? I mean, people get enamored with things on an external level and forget that there's all these layers, like you just described, that aren't as easily seen. And it's oftentimes once you are in it, like what happened to you, that you go, uh-oh, didn't think about this. And that is how we learn. So thank you for sharing a story about something that, you know, took you a while once you were in it to go, oh, wow, I've got to get out of this. And, you know, culture is talked about a lot, and it's a hard thing to define, but we recognize it when it's there, and we recognize it when it's great, and we recognize it when it's bad. and for listeners, think about, even if you're working for yourself, you have created a culture within your solopreneurship. And certainly if you're running a business where you have a team, it is up to you to say, this is how we do things around here. These are the boundaries. This is what is not okay, right? It is something that I think comes from experience, like yours. But it's so good to. And I imagine you have, I don't know if you have retreats or you have, all hands on deck kind of meetings where you review. Okay, let's reinforce. We're kind of drifting over here because of all the stuff that's been going on. We need to come back. That's what a good
Yeah.
coach does. That's what a good
Yeah.
coach
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And one of the things that I learned in it was that, we had articulated company values, but the one thing that I hadn't done was talked about how those values show up in behaviors to me. So I thought that I was being clear when I was using certain phrases. Like at the time we had a value of questioning absolutes. And so I thought that for me, that means like curiosity, kind of, getting to the root cause of problems and not, just kind of saying like, oh, well, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we're always going to do it. But for other people, it meant this kind of like I can say whatever I want to anyone and just put it under questioning absolutes. It was sort of like this like free for all pass. And so it made us both reword our values to be more specific and also create a lot more conversation about behaviors. How do these values show up in day-to-day behaviors with clients, with each other, and on the flip side, for when we look for these values in clients, how do those show up to us? How do we know if a client is exhibiting these values or not exhibiting these values? It just didn't occur to me exactly how explicit I really needed to be, because to me, the values kind of came from my heart, like internally. Mm-hmm. So they made sense to me, and I just didn't understand why they weren't making sense to other people. And so that was a huge learning moment and really helped me go from, again, just kind of like talking about culture as something that was important to really like doing some hard cultural work and really digging into, how does this happen? Somebody told me once that the only thing that happens naturally is chaos. And after 12 years in business, like I am a total believer in that, that everything must be intentional, or it is just, it will be some form of chaos. Sometimes that's a little bit of that's okay. But the more complex your company becomes, the less and less you can leave it to that kind of chance.
Sure. When you look into your crystal ball, Meghan, what do you predict is going to have the greatest impact on our business culture moving forward, on just life in general? Based on the work that you do, what do you see? What do you predict is maybe there's some trends starting to bubble up, or you just have a kind of this vision of here's where we're headed?
Yeah. So for me, I feel like the big thing that that COVID totally accelerated was something that we were already starting to see a lot in kind of like the creative marketing space, but this kind of gig economy and more talent, particularly top talent, really demanding a much more flexible kind of person-centered work environment. And so we are really kind of like going all in on that at 6 Point and really trying to like make it part of our vision for where we're going, as opposed to we were always an in-person physical agency prior to COVID, and now we are 100% virtual. And before COVID, I was like, no, of course we have to be together. I mean, again, like talking about culture, like that is where our culture comes from. And, how are we going to collaborate if we aren't physically together? And I think that what this proved to me is that with the right people and the right kind of like maturity level and skill set and emotional intelligence and communication skills, the virtual environment can actually really help us like unlock another level of growth. We've hired a couple of people over the past year. They're from one, I'm based in Massachusetts, one's in Tennessee, one's in Texas. And so it was so freeing to be able to do a national search for talent, be super picky about who we brought on board, again, making 100% sure the values match and making sure the skill set was there and not having to compromise either. And then also I've had a couple of people relocate during COVID for, personal issues, to help family members, or, somebody gets spouse gets a job and relocates. And it has been absolutely huge to be able to retain talent, whereas before I would have, like, oh, you're moving to Kentucky. Sorry. Like, I guess we can't work together anymore. But now to be able to say, yeah, go for it. And, I had one employee move from Massachusetts to Kentucky. If I didn't know she was moving, I absolutely never would have picked up on it. It was so seamless. It was amazing. And so, I know it's not right for every industry and every business, but I think for ours, it's going to be a real game changer in the caliber of talent we can attract. And if we can get really, really good at, kind of make a core competency of who we are, virtual collaboration, I think it's going to be a way that we can accelerate our own growth and also bring a lot more value to our clients as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And you're right. It's not for every kind of business. My brother's in construction and he'll never be virtual. I mean, there's certain kinds of jobs where you have to be present. But for your line of work and for a lot of people, this gig style economy is definitely opening up more options. And I think it'll be good. It'll be good for people once they get over that letting go of, but wait, we have to be able to, it'll bring more opportunity, which is always good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the one thing that it does demand on the employees' part is just a level of maturity and responsibility that we need to be really clear about and really need to demand, because I do think that, in the same way that it doesn't work for every employer and industry, it also doesn't work for every individual. If you need a lot of hand-holding, if you need a lot, I think it's really for people who know how to manage their own schedule, who are thoughtful about how they spend their time, who are organized, that again, it's all these soft skills that have always been important to businesses. But I feel like the employees who excel at the remote working have those skills in place. And so it kind of makes them like extra valuable. And the people who don't, that might want to work remotely, but are always those people who you have to follow up on, or you're like, clearly you were like watching TV or something while you were doing this because there's all these typos in it or something, like that's not going to fly. So, but it also, it makes me concerned for the companies who don't have that kind of flexibility, because I do think that top employees are going to be looking for more flexibility. So if you're in an industry where you simply can't offer that, I worry about kind of like talent leaks from those industries, that it's going to be even harder for them to find, good quality workforce. And I know, again, for some of the CEOs that I talk with, that talent piece is a huge concern. It's like, well, how do we compete? I can't offer flexibility. Like, as much as I would want to, I can't offer the same flexibility that another industry has. So people are going to jump industries. And that's really concerning. So
yeah, it just presents if they can't offer flexibility, what can they offer that makes working for that organization enticing to people? So you offer other kinds of perks. And because you just hit a really good point, remote work is not for everybody. There are people who will flat out say, no thanks, I don't want to be working out of my home. I want to be somewhere else. I need to be around other people. And then there are those who are doing the happy dance because finally they're like, yes, I now I can work at home and I'm much better, because I'm not being distracted by, we're definitely in a massive transition right now, massive transition. And there's a lot to celebrate. And that's the part of the show we're at now, Meghan, which I call touchdown. So I'm putting you in the red zone. As a Patriots fan, you know all about that red zone.
Absolutely.
There are less than 30 seconds left on the clock. You're down by 4 points. It's third down, and it is now or never. Tell us a story about a time when you metaphorically got that ball into the end zone for the game-winning touchdown.
So I think some of our our biggest wins lately have been during COVID, really helping companies solve major issues. Like I'm thinking there's one company that we recently started working for, and they're actually a buying group. So they have a number of like retailer members, and then they pool their resources and purchase together. And so they were way more important than ever during COVID when logistics challenges and getting supply, a small retailer having clout in that scenario is absolutely huge. And, one of the things as we were kind of like looking at what they could do to really increase their impact, one of the things that we had been kind of thinking about more in terms of like standard, kind of marketing activity, how do we promote their brand? How do we create awareness? And one of the things that we realized, again, kind of like almost at the last minute was like, oh, actually, your brand is really, the transaction is happening at a place where you cannot control it. The transaction is happening at the retailers. So they have a house brand, how do they sell more of that house brand, private label brand? But they're the people who are actually doing the selling aren't really that educated about why this brand is important. And so one of the things that one of the strategists on our team came up with was like, actually, this is not like a kind of mass media awareness play. Instead, this is a play about education. And so we moved from this kind of like, okay, how are we going to, target their end user customers and this like expensive reach? And we were able to kind of completely rework the strategy to say, no, actually, all we need to do is educate the people on the floor selling these products. And so we moved from a marketing campaign to an education system, like a learning system. It's almost like a sales training videos and quizzes and, and that again can all now be done virtually, remotely on a mobile phone. And it was just this like huge game-changing insight that I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, we totally could have steered their company in the wrong direction and made them pay all this money for something that would have been really hard to get a return on investment for. And instead we could be super surgical in how we're approaching it. And it's just one of those moments when I was really proud of the team for, again, kind of like that questioning absolutes mentality of like, I think when you're in branding and you're in marketing, you tend to think of all of the push solutions. Yep. And to, in that moment, have the awareness to really question all of the things that we would normally do and say like, no, could we do something completely different? Could we actually, turn this into education and training initiative? That was really exciting. And we've heard, like lots of excitement and energy from their members about getting that training. They're actually like, yes, absolutely. Like that is totally what we need. So I'm excited also about the ripple effects that this is going to happen, that this is going to have for these small retailers who are going to get the benefit of all this. So I think it's going to have this really cool trickle down effect that's going to help small mom and pops, as well as this larger kind of membership driven organization.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really great. What a great win for not just your agency, but for, the clients you serve. I love it. And as we get to the end of this amazing conversation today, Meghan, you really have showed up and brought your A game today. I've been taking notes as you've been talking. You've had so many interesting ideas. Could you share with us 1 to 3 key offensive strategies straight out of your leadership playbook that listeners could use right away to see some kind of forward progress in their work and or life?
Yeah, 100%. So the things that we focus all of our clients on, and I use in my own company, is number one, you need to really truly focus your energy on the one opportunity that is going to move your business forward and stop thinking about all of the opportunities that you could do. Again, kind of like a focus for the next 90 days of pick one thing that if you did that one thing, it would kind of enable other things to start happening. So really drilling down for that focus. I think not having focus is one of the things that actually like most often hurts growth and progress. So that would be number one. Number two is, you were talking a little bit before about, talking to people and, the power that has to unlock things. I am a huge proponent of you need to have data and stop trusting your gut. I think for most entrepreneurs and leaders, we are way confident about our guts, but not necessarily always in a good way. And we often look at things from our own perspective. And so my advice to listeners would be, whoever you serve, whoever that market is, whoever that ideal customer is, you need to find 10 of them today and ask them to sit down with you for 15 or 20 minutes. And you need to listen to them about what their world is like right now, not feedback about your services, but truly listen to what issues they are dealing with on a wider level, what their day-to-day is like, and really get out of your own head and into theirs. So that's number two. And then number three is I'm currently listening to a book called Who Not How. And it's by Dan Sullivan, and it's really great. And it's this whole mentality of, as opposed to saying oh my gosh, I want to go after this market, how am I going to possibly, pivot my business into this market, or how am I going to possibly sell online? You need to instead clarify the vision and then figure out who can get you to do that. And I think that it's a super smart mindset tweak, that if you start thinking that way, you're going to just unlock all of this new potential. And number one, how fast you can move. And number two, how many mistakes you can avoid. If you're thinking about who has done this before that I can just say, make this happen. And so I think that those would be my three big tips.
Fantastic. And team, I'll put a link to that book by Dan Sullivan on Meghan's show notes page at pyppodcast.com, because it's definitely one to add to your private library. It's a great resource. He's a smart man, and glad you brought that book up. And for people who'd like to find out more about you and what you do, Meghan, where do you hang out online?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so certainly feel free to connect with me there. I've also set up a landing page for your listeners, our website, which is 6 Point Creative, so SIX, 6 spelled out, SIX, POINT creative.com/PYP. And there you can, there's a quiz you can take if you think you might be a second stage company, think you might have hit a plateau. And there's also ways to connect with me personally on that page. So.
Oh, fantastic. And that will be on her show notes page as well, team. pyppodcast.com. Take the quiz, or send somebody to take the quiz. It's always great to get that kind of feedback and open up new questions for yourself, or perhaps even figure out something you're thinking about. So that's wonderful. And I know I've alluded to your team, Meghan, but as we wrap things up today, my final question is, who is your team? Who do you like to watch on Sunday? So, dun, 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 who do you love?
The Patriots all the way. I'm a diehard New Englander. So, although these days it's the Red Sox. So
yes. How about the Bruins?
The Bruins are killing it right now. So yes, my husband's a big hockey fan, so the Bruins are off and on at our house.
Yeah. That my partner is as well, and that we've got all them recorded, and it's wonderful. Unfortunately, Red Sox games are not in my market, but when I come east, that was my father's team. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and my grandmother's team. So I have a connection to that part of the world, and it's a wonderful part of the world. And you have been great today, Meghan. Thank you so much for taking us inside the world that you operate in and giving us so many things to think about in terms of growing a business, peer learning groups and why they matter, and what to think about in terms of staying on track. Stop chasing all the opportunities, focus on one at a time. I think that's a huge, huge point.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. I appreciate all the thoughtful questions, and it was great.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes, but leadership skills, They never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Got a great key offensive strategy you like to share? Write to us at coach@pyppodcast.com or on Twitter, use #PYP and let us know how you're running your ball into the end zone for those game-winning touchdowns.